Hello and welcome to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy,
And I'm Claire.
and we're here to talk about some of the disturbing things that go on in the world, past and present. We feel like not knowing doesn't mean the crazy doesn't exist.
So we're going to scar you with the knowing.
Enjoy.
Today we're talking about Martha Ann Johnson, also known as Martha Ann Bowen. Now, Martha is hailing from Georgia in the time frame of 1977 and 1982 is when the deaths occur.
Ooh, we like them 70s.
Now, just to throw it out there, we will be discussing children deaths.
Because that's what you like to report on, just to mess with my emotions. Thank you. Thank you in advance, Claire.
I cannot help that the weak-minded target the innocent and unable to protect themselves.
On to you. Got my eye on you. Carry on.
So Martha is described as a quarrelsome woman, which explains a little bit why by the time she's 22, she's working on her second marriage.
Holy smokes, when did she get married the first time?
So Martha was born in 1955 and was married at 16 when she also had her first baby girl. I kind of feel like it might be one of those shotgun wedding scenarios because she was married and had her first child.
Yeah.
But I don't know that for sure. 16, even for the 50s, seems a little early. But I realized they were doing things earlier back then. But regardless, at 16 years old, she welcomes Jenny Ann Wright, who was born in 1971. Now, that marriage doesn't last for very long because by the time she turns 20, she's divorced and remarried and has a son with her second husband, who is born in 1975, and she names him James William Taylor. That marriage is also extremely brief. And by the time she's 22, she runs into Earl Bowen, who will become her third husband. So
Good Lord.
I know this happened quickly, but she's 22 now and on husband number 3 and has 2 young kids. Now, when she meets Earl, he gets along with her 2 children, Jenny Ann and James. So they decide to get married, regardless of the fact that they argue frequently and she's described as a bitter woman.
Do her ex-husbands have anything to do with the kids? Do you know? Or is
No,
it like
leaves?
It sucks for the kids.
Yeah. When they'll argue, Earl will opt to just leave until he's able to cool off and come back. Yeah, but it's not like for the evening. He's gone for a bit and then he'll come back. But
you know what? It's better that he leaves than back in this. Yeah, than in this, like in the 60s. That was like the thing of you beat your wife if she disagreed with you. So good on him to take a step back and maybe leaving for the whole day or the whole night. Not so cool, but it's better than beating the crap out of her.
Well, I don't know what he does when he disappears, but he disappears. But early in like a few months of their marriage, September 1977, it's again one of these times when they argue and Earl leaves the house. Now, while Earl is out of the house, Martha rushes 2-year-old James to the Clayton County Hospital. Now, according to Martha, she was unable to wake the toddler that morning.
What?
Doctors were unable to revive him. Now, it was assumed he was a victim of sudden infant death syndrome, which for people who don't know is when there's an unexplained death of an otherwise healthy baby who's typically under a year old. Usually it's during sleep, and more often than not, it happens in a crib, so it's also referenced as crib death. Now,
wait a minute. He was 2.
Right, I'm getting there. So where the cause is unknown, it does appear that SIDS is associated to affecting how children's breath is controlled when they're really young. And researchers have discovered that sleeping on the belly is more risk for them to smother themselves basically in their sleep. But it also is that for James, he's outside the typical range for a SIDS death because he's 2 and he's not an infant. But apparently, it wasn't suspicious to authorities. Because of his stepson's death, Earl returns home to comfort Martha in her grieving.
You gotta love the 70s. Like, seriously, the doctors are like, oh, this kid died. Let's just chalk it up to SIDS. No. And then he's like, oh, that's the reason to go home.
Which, by the way, I think it was in like 2019, there were 1,200 SIDS-related deaths. Or SIDS, like the diagnosis on a death certificate was SIDS. That's not, I mean, considering how many babies would be born in 2019, I mean, the odds are low. It's not like this is happening every single day. Well, I guess 2 that it might, but the odds aren't high that somebody's going to have a baby that dies from SIDS. Yeah. It's just, they don't know what causes it. They would assume it's for young babies. You put them on their belly. I would think that they can't roll, so they smother themselves or they get overheated and then they don't have the energy to do whatever. But when they've researched it, it would appear sleeping on their backs is what's better. But anyway, so Earl comes home to comfort Martha. Obviously, that doesn't, the death of a baby isn't going to fix their relationship. Not that I would expect it to. But their relationship does not improve. And they go right back into they argue all the time. But that doesn't stop Martha and Earl from welcoming little baby boy Earl Wayne in 1979, and then immediately followed by baby girl Tabitha in 1980. Now, when Tabitha is only 3 months old, they get into an argument again, and Earl leaves. Now, shortly after
good?
No, but shortly after, I imagine it's hard to just leave when you've got
kids.
All the children. She's only 3 months old. But shortly after he leaves, Martha calls 911 because Tabitha is blue. Now, the paramedics get there and they cannot revive her, and she is rushed to the hospital where she's declared dead almost immediately.
Aww.
Now again, the hospital diagnoses her as a victim of SIDS, which, by the way, the odds of 2 SIDS deaths are considered highly unlikely, but the authorities seem to accept the diagnosis.
Wait, what? How is that? Okay.
I knew.
So you've got one kid who's too old to even be considered SIDS, but they just chalk it up to SIDS, and now you have a second child in the same family. How many years? Like 2-3 years later, another child is dead in the same family of SIDS, and nobody's like raised an eyebrow, like, maybe we should check this lady out.
So I will say that they do move around. So later on, when we get to the point of Martha being arrested, the authorities will say part of the issue was it's not like she's going to the same hospitals or in the same county. So it's easier to go, this looks suspicious if it's like all within the same area and the same people being like, there's another, mind you, it's within the same state of Georgia, but this would be a different hospital or like a different house. So it's just like they're not connecting dots because nothing's deemed suspicious.
I gotcha.
But again, it's highly unlikely that there'd be 2 SIDS deaths in one family.
If there was, I would think that there's more like a genetic, because don't get me wrong, I'm sure it has been unfortunate and people have had kids pass away or whatever, but I would think before it would be SIDS at that point, it'd be like some kind of genetic thing.
Yeah. So I would feel like that could also be the situation of they don't know what else to put, but you have to put a cause of death on there. So they just write it off onto SIDS because it's understood that you don't really understand why, but they're dead.
All right. So we've got a dead 2-year-old and a dead 3-month-old. Way to go. Thanks for that. Keep going. Your sick son bitch that you decided to report on.
Now, Earl, even though he's not convinced that his children or the kids have died from anything, like I feel like at this point he's suspicious of Martha because it's always when he's gone.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, he goes right back to her and they reconcile again.
They don't have another kid, do they?
No, they're done with the baby making. But in January 1981, Martha rushes to the hospital with 2-year-old Earl Wayne, who was suffering from seizures that morning. She claims this one's rich. She claims she found him with rat poison the previous day. Now, mind you, he's 2. But it stumps the doctors because when they test him for rat poison, it comes back negative. So they're not 100% sure what caused the seizures and give a vague diagnosis of a seizure disorder with unknown etiology. But they treat him and then he's released. That's in January.
So I have a question.
Hey.
Did the doctors see him having the seizures?
I don't think so. But I can't be sure because they did diagnose him with a seizure disorder. So maybe he had one when he first got there, and then the longer he was at the hospital, he didn't have one again. So they just didn't know what was causing the seizures. And it's one of those, if they become more regular, come back kind of scenarios.
Yeah. Or one of mine had a seizure when he was an infant, but they wrote it up as a femoral seizure because he had a high fever, and he hasn't ever had one since.
So I've also heard of other babies having seizures, and it's like I don't want to say they grow out of it, but it's like a one-time or even like just a certain time period that they have them, and then they don't get them again. So he's treated and then released. But in February, Earl and Martha would have another argument that would cause Earl to leave. But again, Martha would rush to the hospital with Earl Wayne on February 12th, who by the time she makes it to the hospital, he's already in cardiac arrest. And Martha would claim he was having a seizure while she was taking him to the hospital. Now, doctors are able to revive him, but he's placed on life support. And after 3 days, he's determined to be brain dead and taken off of life support and does pass away.
Oh, gosh.
Now, that would just leave Jenny Ann, her oldest daughter, as the only surviving child at this point. Now, just after Earl Wayne's funeral, Jenny would tell a Fulton County social worker she was afraid of her mother and didn't want to stay home.
Why was she scared? Was she like being abused, or did she witness?
I don't know what the scenario was that started her fear, but that would start an inquiry, but nothing was found to give cause to remove Jenny from the home and place her into foster care. So they don't have any reason to think that there's anything going on in the house to pull her from her mother's care.
How old is Jenny Ann?
She's 11.
Okay.
A year after Earl Wayne's death, Martha would place a 911 call telling dispatchers that her daughter was not breathing.
Wait, what?
Yes. Police and paramedics arrived to find Jenny Ann lying face down in her bed with foam coming from her mouth. She's pronounced dead at the scene. Now, this time, her death can't be explained away as SIDS.
You sure? I bet if she goes back to the same doctor.
Jenny had no health issues and seemed to be a healthy 11-year-old girl. Now, a few days prior to Jenny's death, Martha had taken her to the doctor because Jenny had been complaining of bad headaches and chest pain, which I kind of feel like her mom was trying to poison her.
I was just about to ask, was she poisoning her? When we were chit-chatting last night, I just got done saying there's so many women that choose poison. I think it's because they lack the upper body strength to do other stuff, and it can be hidden a little bit better. But that's what it sounds like. Poison.
Yeah, but regardless, the doctor gives her Tylenol and a rib band. Which, by the way, I did not know what a rib band was, but it's apparently an elastic strap that's used to reduce muscle pain from, like, if you strain a chest muscle. I thought it was interesting. Now, mind you, they don't use those bands if you have like a disease that's causing that chest pain. So it's not like a band-aid for any heart-related chest pains. It's more of the muscles or like in between your ribs. Now, what it does is it restricts the amount of motion in your chest, so that way it's not as painful.
Did she
Which I
have
think
cracked
is
ribs?
no, but I think it's super weird that like my chest hurts. Here's an elastic band and some Tylenol.
It's
But
the
I
70s.
also, well, it's the 80s. But I also don't know how often children come in explaining or complaining of chest pain.
Well, I would think that would warrant like more concern.
Yeah. It is noted that this is the fourth child's death of Martha's, but the medical examiner doesn't flag Jenny's death to be suspicious.
What?
Even though it's put on there that she was asphyxiated.
Wait.
How is it not like a red flag there of an 11-year-old just doesn't smother herself in her bed?
And you said that it was stated she was a healthy 11-year-old. So how does a healthy 11-year-old just asphyxiate in her own bed?
I'm not 100% sure, but the county coroner refused to hold an inquest and the district attorney considered the matter closed.
Was she banging the coroner? Like, what
I
is
have
going
no
on here?
idea because I was just like, I would think that would be like an immediate what's going on.
Yeah.
Now childless, I guess Earl has no reason to stay anyway, so he's had enough of Martha and files for divorce after burying Jenny. Now, Martha probably at this point is thinking she got away with murder and would, now these are not my words, just so we're clear, but Martha would waddle down the aisle with husband number 4,
That was not nice.
Charles Johnson, in 1985. This is 3 years after Jenny's death, by the way.
Oh gosh, is she gonna crank out more kids? Because I don't know if I can handle any more.
I already told
baby
you,
deaths.
there's no more children.
You said that her and Earl didn't crank out any more kids.
Andrea,
I'm
there's
just
no more
verifying
children.
now that she's done her waddling down the aisle to somebody else, which by the way, that's super messed up to say it like that.
I thought it was too. I was like, they would say she waddled down the aisle with husband number 4.
So she's a big girl?
So Martha's 5'1" and 245 pounds.
Bam.
She's
got some extra weight on her.
She's a big girl. But I thought it was fucked up to say somebody waddled down the aisle. But she's not exactly a nice lady, so.
I agree.
Now, a journalist with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran an investigative piece on her in December 1988 regarding all the deaths and all 4 children's deaths, how it was suspicious and the fact that it wasn't investigated well enough.
Why did the journalist pick up her story?
I wouldn't be surprised if somebody tipped him off.
Like an officer?
Well, maybe not even an officer, because all authorities are going to claim because it was in different counties. That's why they didn't piece anything together. It's not like it was investigated and then she goes to another county and if another kid died, that it's not like there's a record of an investigation on a previous child's death, that it was all supposedly, not suspicious.
Right.
A month after that article is posted, Dr. William Anderson declared that his original 1977 diagnosis of SIDS for James Taylor was probably wrong.
What? So he reads an article connecting that this lady has gone around killing her 4 kids, and now he's like, oh, my bad. Ignore my original diagnosis of SIDS. So let's scratch that. A little line straight through there.
So he was interviewed, and that's what he told a newsman. Now, with 2020 hindsight, the doctor was like, I wouldn't hesitate to say there's a 90% chance this is a homicide. And I'm like,
well, no shit.
Oh, right. Thanks for, now that you've had a moment to reflect.
Because here's the thing, I realize it's tough because SIDS is a tough thing to diagnose, but that was the first kid, right?
Yeah.
So if he had done his job and been like,
This
a
is
2-year-old
suspicious.
dying of SIDS is very suspicious. Let's investigate a little bit further into this. I feel like there's a very real possibility the other 3 kids would not have been killed.
So that's what I thought was sad, is that if he was way outside what's a usual threshold for SIDS, you would think a parent would want to know what killed their kid, but I realize not every parent's going to know what SIDS is. And if the doctor says it's SIDS, I also feel like there's the factor in there of, I mean, I get sometimes shit happens and a kid will die and it is natural, but it's a sensitive area to tread into, of just trying to be tactfully investigating of maybe one of the parents did it. Could be pretty fucked up. Because could you imagine being investigated and your kid died? I mean, assuming you didn't murder them.
Right. But at the same time, I feel like
it does no justice for the victim.
Not only does it do no justice for the victim, but at the same time, if it's out of the realm of possibility of dying of SIDS, like the likelihood of this child dying of SIDS. I get that the 3-month-old could have been mistaken, because that's within the realm of possibilities, unfortunately. But at 2 years old, there was no bruising on the kid's face. Like, what was she like? How was she smothering these kids? I realize there's pillows and okay, but
getting ahead of the story. So
I'm frustrated.
We're back
it's your fault.
Back to the doctor. So where everyone else, doctors, investigators, everybody seemed to overlook everything initially, the article shed much needed light on the unexplained deaths of all 4 children. Now, this caught the attention of authorities and they reopen the cases and to kind of delve deeper. And
I didn't know they could do that.
Well, they did. Now, on July 3rd, 1989, officers arrest Martha at her Locust Grove home for the murder of Jenny. When they get to the police station, Martha confesses to police that she suffocated both Jenny and James. She told in a videotaped confession that she would lay on top of her sleeping children, pinning them down until they stopped breathing.
What?
That's right. She used her fat.
That's okay. If you take out the fact that she's laying on top of children, but I never would have thought fat as a
murder weapon.
Yeah.
You think she had to register her fat rolls as concealed weapons?
I don't think they were concealed.
I kind of, that one case that we were talking about with where it was like they had a rock declared a deadly weapon. Would that not too?
Oh, yeah.
She was wielding it.
That's fucked up, Claire. She's wielding. Take this, then take that.
So
it reminds me. Wait. It reminds me of that Facebook thing that you sent me, where that lady uses her boob to smash a roach that's crawling across the table.
Yes.
And again, I can only laugh about this because I'm not thinking about the children. Just
now, mind you,
your logic isn't a pillow; it's to lay on these children.
Now, mind you, one of them's 11.
Yeah, poor baby.
I get the 3-month-old didn't stand a chance, which, by the way,
but again,
she won't confess to the other 2. The first one and Jenny, she confesses to, and then she backtracks on the one for James. So, because there's no evidence or anything, and Jenny's was because the other ones were explained as SIDS or the seizures. So, Jenny's the only one that it was asphyxia. It went on her death certificate, which, by the way, I thought that would be like something to dig into. She didn't just keel over. So,
yeah, my mind is still blown on that one, that the police didn't choose to investigate that.
Yeah, even if there weren't 3 other deaths before her, I would think just that alone would have been enough to investigate some shit.
Yes, an 11-year-old in bed, just unable to wake up, foaming from the mouth. does not seem like a natural cause of death and should just be case closed. Up. That's all.
And I would say an 11-year-old that previously said she was afraid to be around her mother.
Yes. Wow.
Now, during her confession with police, she does tell them the reason she did it was to punish her husband.
Earl, the guy that's not the father of 2 of those kids, not saying that murdering his biological children is appropriate or justified, but what did he do?
I think when he left, when they'd argue and he'd leave, that's when one of the kids got it. But I think it's because he loved them so much and she hit him where it hurt.
That's
fucked up.
Is she dead? Does she get the death penalty?
I'm getting there. Still quit jumping ahead.
I'm not trying to. It's
now,
just she's too slow, as you like to put it.
She was indicted for the murders of Tabitha and Earl, but those cases don't go any further because, again, there's no evidence on those. Now, she was not charged in JW's death.
Wait, who's JW?
James. James Wayne.
Oh, JW. Got it.
The 2-year-old.
She didn't get charged. She confessed, though.
So, you know how we've done with the serial killers? They can confess to all the things that they want, but if you don't have a case beyond that, because, again, she tries to go backwards on her confession, so they need proof that something happened. Now, with 11-year-old Jenny, she was the only one in the house when Jenny died, and she videotaped the confession. That's why it sticks. So she's charged with Jenny's murder since that's what they have on her. Now, it doesn't help that she recants her confession because she's found guilty in April 1990 of murdering Jenny, and she is sentenced to death.
Good.
Now, you're going to be upset. So I'll let you be happy that she's sentenced to death for a second. Because later on, that death sentence is commuted to life without parole.
Why?
Now, again, it's changed and she gets life with parole.
Oh, wait.
Now she'll be denied.
No.
She'll be denied parole 5 times before finally being granted parole in March of 2020 at the age of 65. And she's still out. She is out.
Oh, what the heck?
Now, mind you, I found this information devastating as well, but she is...
Do we know her address?
I'm not publicly putting it on there.
Not her. Okay, let me rephrase.
She's in Georgia.
She didn't even leave Georgia?
No. Well, I feel like if she's on parole, aren't there requirements of, you can't go too far?
I'm pretty sure you can get it approved, but...
I feel like for her, she's lucky she's out. Now, mind you, her husband does go on and have children with another woman.
Oh, yeah. She had gotten married to number 4.
So she does Jenny has a half brother out there who wished that Martha would have died in prison because he would have voluntarily carried her body out in a bag.
No, I think he would have needed some assistance with that one.
I don't know how big he is. He could be a tall man, bodybuilder, but he speaks very publicly how upset he is about her being out.
So wait. So that was Jenny's
half
biological father's other son?
Yes.
Okay.
Which I thought was interesting that they didn't grow up together. He doesn't know his half-sister. So just the fact that he was robbed that opportunity to have his sister be part of his life.
Now, not his dad's fault in any way, shape, or form, but why wasn't he? What's his excuse for not being involved in Jenny's life? Because at least she would have had somewhere to go.
I feel like in the 70s, not that it doesn't happen now, but I feel like during the 70s when people split, they kind of did do that thing of you go your separate ways and then start a new family. Like once you're remarried, it wasn't like a...
Yeah, that's true.
I feel like it was all too normal to...
Damn, the 70s were screwed up.
They sure were.
Well, thanks for that, Claire.
Mm-hmm. They would have can.
Try a little
but
less.
Still... So It was not my words that she waddled down the aisle. That same article said that she used her bulk to kill her kids. That was her murder weapon, was her bulk, to which I've never heard anyone described like that. And I was like, oh my God. But I do feel like with the kids, even with Jenny, I feel like it stumped them because it wasn't like a normal smothering or choking. There weren't like, I don't think anybody would have thought that the mother would lay on them.
Yeah, that's
like an even distribution of weight. Maybe it was like one of those, what the fuck happened here? Where like, if you were to smother somebody with a pillow, it does bruising around their mouth.
Yeah. And they had all over bruising because I feel like 250 pounds on a 3-month-old is a lot.
I have heard of people who, when they sleep with an infant in the bed, roll over and don't realize they smothered the baby.
Yeah. Ooh, there was a case one time that I had pop up in my newsfeed about a mom who was diabetic, but her and her husband had gotten into an argument and she went to bed without eating anything. She was breastfeeding their infant and fell asleep or passed out, slipped into a diabetic coma and suffocated the baby. And when her husband realized that the baby was underneath of his wife and that he couldn't wake his wife up, he called paramedics. They had to pour, I think it was sugar water down her throat, and she was rushed to the hospital, but the baby passed away. Like, oh God, I could not imagine.
Well, that's where I'm seeing, since she claims that, that wasn't intentional. I could see that be the case because Earl left, and maybe it was one of those, it was easier to have the 3-month-old in the bed. Because you got to keep in mind also, these were all young kids, with the exception of Jenny. And then it makes me curious if Jenny was shit-talking. Not that she deserved to die, but if she told authorities that she was afraid to be around her mom, maybe her mom was just like, had enough of that. And that's what the motivator was.
I'm not trying to quiz you here, but what was the time difference between when she said she was scared of her mom and her being killed?
A year.
Did she abuse these kids in any other way?
Not that it was found, like, not that anybody said. I would imagine one of the husbands would have said if she was abusive, but it seemed like it was more of the verbal variety rather than laying hands on them. Which is why when authorities went to initially investigate when Jenny said she was scared, they couldn't find a reason to pull her out. But I don't understand how that, paired with her death a year later, didn't go, this is shady. I think if a kid says they're scared and then they're dead.
Well, like you said, if it was different hospitals, different officers, different everything, there's no trace of her saying she was scared.
No, that's what authorities will say. But fuck, an investigative reporter was able to piece it together.
Yeah, that doesn't make the police look too good.
Now, I also think it's a factor that she had her first child at 16.
No.
Well, we don't know the circumstances around that happening. It could be a case of one of those, just like the one other chick where she's raped and forced to marry.
True.
It was my soap one. But I'm just saying that it could be a case of because she was young and pregnant. And I don't know that's the fact. I guess she's alive, so if anybody wants to run down that one, you can ask her. Just make sure you don't lie down.
I feel like if she's not owning up to killing 3 of the kids, her being honest with any questions.
Yeah.
Pretty slim chance there. Well, I use the word slim loosely. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Homicide Hobbies. If we made you laugh, if we made you cry, or if we mind-fucked you for the day, then we thank you for listening. Please write a review on whatever you're listening to us on. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers. We're freaking awesome. And join us next week for another episode of Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy.
And I'm Claire.
That's all we've got.